Hello and welcome to the Forgeborn Finishing School. I'm Casey Kidd and I'll be analyzing Forgeborn battles to help take your game to the next level. Welcome to this week's episode where we have a special guest on the show, Stefan, aka TMind, who is here to show us a really awesome tool he created to find some synergies in his collection. Stefan, how are you doing today?
Hi Ryan, I'm doing fine. Fine, a little bit nervous about this. Um,
Oh,
maybe.
no need to be
We'll see.
nervous at all. Just here to, really just show this amazing tool. One time you dropped an image. Well, really, I think the first thing I saw was a text file in Discord, and I was just kind of looking at it. And the more I looked at it, the deeper I started looking, I was like, oh, this is really neat. This is really useful. And then it was maybe a week or a couple weeks later, you dropped a chart, or a graph in Discord, and I was blown away, absolutely blown away. I just started digging into that, and that's when I reached out to you. No, I'm super excited that you're on here to kind of show us this tool, talk through it, and just kind of go through the process. So really appreciate you coming on and just share what you've learned throughout the process and what you've created.
Yeah, thank you for this opportunity. First, because I've been dabbling with this tool or developing it step by step, taking different directions and see where it was taking me. But I didn't really interact with anyone. Only sometimes I dropped something in the Discord strategy channel, I guess, but no one was really picking up on it. And I said, okay, maybe I'll just keep doing this for myself. I reached out to Eric and to look into how he was doing progress, and maybe I could help him along or something. But he was doing this stuff in JavaScript, which I'm not really not comfortable, maybe even to work in. So I continued to develop this tool a little bit, and then I dropped a line and some graphs for the new guy. Some new guy came in, wanted to know which decks can he use for his from his collection, and I thought maybe I just give him this as a start. Maybe it's useful for him, and I think that's when you also picked it up.
Yeah, and I think I had given that person a little bit of advice. I don't remember if it was just a deck pairing recommendation or just some general advice. But right after that's when I saw what you dropped, and as I said, kind of blown away. So we've talked about it just a little bit, kind of what it does, how it can be used. Can you just give a general overview of what it is that is doing this tool that you've created? And we'll show some of the outputs here as you go through it.
Certainly. First of all, I built heavily on the collection manager that was done by More Than Most. First and foremost, I think, because it contains the database for all the cards and all the Forgeborns, and it also contains a table of synergies that were already found or deemed to be useful. And the collection manager was the first thing I used and tried to find which of my decks had good synergies or which should be fused or not. But it missed a little bit the ability to just look at specific decks only and not like the whole collection. And so that's one of the reasons I wanted to, maybe I can download the data and find some synergies myself with it. And this was the first thing that I did. So now I can take the data from this from the sheets, from the collection manager sheets, and build a little database where I can look up cards that exist, or not only cards, more like forges or modifiers and cards, and Forgeborns as well. And then I read the collection from the Solforge Fusion website. So for a specific user. So I took my username and I got a JSON formatted file that was able to parse, and so I could build a collection in the program or in the tool. So it contains a collection of a specific user, and it contains a database of all the available cards that can be then referenced. And also I copied this sheet of the synergies, and the tool then is able to create all the different fusions with all the decks, and then check each deck or each fusion which synergies are actually available. And that means that some cards are providing something and other cards are looking for it. Like card is let's say provides the trait mage because it's a mage, and other card works on mages. Then that's kind of a synergy that you maybe want to strengthen in a fusion or from one deck with another deck. Yeah. So that's the main idea. It creates all these permutations of decks and fuses them all, and then you can see depending on what synergies are created in this sheet, which one of those come up in different fusions, and this gives you an idea maybe on which ones you want to look at for pairing them.
One thing I've noticed, and you kind of mentioned it early on in the beginning, that really uses the collection manager but separates this tool from the collection manager, is that when I want to look for mage synergies in the collection manager, I simply see a list of all of my decks with the highest mage count and then the highest mage synergy payout. And then oftentimes that's going to put a certain faction to the very top, let's say Tempest. So the first 13 decks I see are Tempest, and then you get some Aloyan smattered in there, maybe Terra smattered in there, obviously a bunch of Necrin, but your tool takes every single one of my decks that is eligible to be fused together. For example, they're not the same faction, and then tells me their synergy. In the collection manager, oftentimes I will sort by mages and then filter out Tempest because I'm looking to pair it into a Tempest potentially, so I don't want to see those options. Your tool kind of just cuts all that out for me and then suggests to me the good pairings, right?
I think that Tempest is just a little bit predetermined to have the most mage synergies. First of all, Tempest is the only faction I think that provides that actually works on mages. Other factions only provide mages themselves. So I think to have these synergies, you kind of have to. I think you have to have Tempest in there.
Right.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
Aloyan has some other pretty hefty
mage
payoffs.
I'm just Adamance comes to mind. Yeah, you're right.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. No, but I still think the Tempest comes up the most because they have the most of this type of the style. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Also the tool, of course, it will also give you these possible fusions. But the nice thing is that if you take the output, this is a CSV file, you can open it with any sheet or Excel numbers or Google Sheets, for example. You can open those. You can open it with those programs, and you can then filter. For example, if you don't want to see Tempest decks, then you can just filter them out. You can do all the stuff that you can do with regular tables. So that's nice.
So as we've kind of talked through this, my initial question when seeing this, I could see why someone wants a tool like this. It became self-apparent to me, but and I planned to ask you what drove you to create this, but I guess after that last iteration, I hope it's clear to the viewer that this really is a separate tool set on top of the collection manager that really just kind of enhances alongside your capabilities to analyze your own collection. Not sure if I'm kind of hitting the mark there, but I'm still going to throw it back at you. What specifically drove you to create this?
That's true. It has a little bit of more adjustability, maybe. So you're not stuck to the format. You can do more stuff with the table, like filter for different things. Although that's not the only thing that we get from the tool compared to the collection manager. Because to get all these synergies recognized or recorded, then actually the tool creates a graph system. So for every fusion, it creates a graph with nodes where the nodes are the cards, and it draws edges or creates edges or draws lines between those cards that interact with each other. And one output is a text file where you can see all the edges, which means you can see all the cards that synergize with each other. The other thing is this sheet or table that you can look at to filter for your collection. And one of the things that I really would like to see in the beginning, and which was another motivation for me to do this, was having some visualization of it. And these graphs can actually be used to look at them in nice free tools that are already available. And I found a nice tool called Gephi, and it's used for protein folding or something. It's
Nope. It's used to show Solforge fusion decks.
Oh yeah, okay.
The text output of the CSV outputs that you had dropped before, that was the one where I just kept looking, and the more I looked, the more it started to make sense to me. It took a while to unpack, but all the meat of the data was there, and it really just was like, oh, yep, that synergizes. Oh, that synergizes. Oh, this individual card synergizes that many times in this deck. I think I would have got there eventually looking at the deck list, but being able to just see it in a list started to become very helpful. Then you drop that Gephi graph, and it instantly popped in my head, and I said, oh, I get it. And so there really are good tools together, but I think what's really amazing is that different people internalize data and visualize data differently. So me being able to see a graph, it just popped in my head, and I was like, oh, okay, I get this deck, and now I start to see some play lines. Others might be more text centric and pick that up quicker. So I think they were both very, very good pieces. And what I think would be interesting for the community at large is, you've built this deck building assistant, this tool to assist you with finding eligible fuses or good fused decks. So I'm assuming you've learned a little bit of wisdom along the way, or some good things to look for in fused decks. So if you could just share some of those lessons learned, if you will, about forming strong fused decks.
Of course, this thing that working with synergies is not the end to the story, right? There's so much more in this game in complexity that this basically can only work as okay, here is something that you may have noticed or may not have, or this could be interesting. Have a look at it. Try if this works for you. So you have you can get a base on what you can work with in the beginning. That's a nice thing. Mm-hmm. But it can also lead you into a little bit of false traps. For example, I'm fascinated in general by upgrading ability, right? And I was looking for, okay, what is the best upgrade deck I can get? Or what has the most upgrade synergies in my collection? Mm-hmm. And I found a nice pairing, which was great on paper. And when I played it, it kind of didn't work out because it didn't have any bodies on the board. And it's a whole other story, and something probably maybe to build up upon in the future, because right now there's no information on how strong creatures are, or any of the I have 3 different levels and I don't get to play all of them, or maybe I just get to play some of them. This is, of course, this whole complexity cannot be really taken into account. Yeah. So, of course, while you have this initial idea, maybe it doesn't mean necessarily that the one with the most numbers of synergies is the best deck. And not only, maybe you shouldn't only rely on one single synergy, for example.
But I think that
upgrading.
Yeah, I think that brings up a really good point, and honestly, something that's probably going to be a future episode, because there's a topic that comes up, I would say, amongst some of the strong players in the community, at least in a smaller group that I hang out with, and that too much of a good thing brings diminishing returns. And so when talking about upgrade, when you shove all of the upgrade synergy cards into a deck, it might pay off in the 4th cycle or the 3rd cycle, but you're probably never going to get there. Shambling's another one that we always talk about, like, where does the diminishing return exist in a deck? And it does exist. Some people may not believe that it does. But yeah, too much of a good thing, it can be a bad thing. So that's a very, very good point. Was there any other, deck fusing strategies you wanted to or words of wisdom you wanted to share, Stefan?
I think looking at, for example, these different communities, I think that the stronger decks are decks that have only a single community, and by community I mean cards that work together in a close range. One card works with other cards, and from those cards they work again with other cards, so they form like a triangle, you could say. If you have those, that are very valuable. And if your deck is too widespread, if you have too many different small communities or small let's say maybe synergies of cards that work together, and they don't fit because they're doing different things, and you only see so much of your deck during a game. Yeah, let's say maybe you have warriors, you have mages and something else, and they don't really overlap. They don't have an overlay, you know.
Right, nothing
That's
that ties or binds them all together.
yeah, I think.
I do
I
when
don't.
I see decks recommended, or someone throws out a deck and says, "What is your opinion on this?" When I see decks like that, Stefan, like my thought process or my response is typically the deck lacks an identity because
Mhm.
it's trying to do too many things in a disparate fashion. Like you said, it's got a small cluster of warriors, a small cluster of dinos, a small cluster of mages, and it's like, well, in one person's thought process, that could provide flexibility to a deck, but because of the draw cycles of Solforge Fusion, you don't have the consistency to when you first cycle play some dinosaurs you may not see them in the second cycle. So you need your
Yeah.
synergy payoff cards to kind of work off of some of the cards you didn't play in the earlier cycle. But yeah, so that was a good way, and I normally say that deck lacks identity or a common theme,
Mhm.
and to tie that for our viewers, that's in this tool or what you're saying. That's the communities that we see in decks.
Clusters is a nice word for it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, kind of talking on that theme, I regularly have viewers or community members reach out to me and ask for assistance looking through their collection and recommending, either strong half decks with my notes on them or fused deck pairings that I think would be good. And so after talking with you, I went back and took some of the recent requestees collections, obviously got their permission, and then sent them over to you to run through this tool so that we could have some outputs to show and then talk about here. So let's take a look at a couple of these decks. We're going to show the Gephi images here. And so this first one we have is the Guides of Barb and Wandering, fused with the Annoying Troll Philosophers. So this is a Bizarak Tempest Necrium deck. And it really looks like it's a strong mage spell synergy deck. And this one in the Gephi image kind of shows, I would say, a really well and interconnected deck with a strong identity. So you have a lot of your mages. You have Stormcaller there off on the side, everything kind of tying back to it, being free spells, of course. So it's going to look like it ties with quite a lot of things. You have Conflagrate, which, ties into your Lightning Tamer, your Invocus, your Spite Maiden, Stormcaller, Invoker. That's quite a lot of mages, and it shows you how it ties to all of them right there. But it's all kind of central, too. I think when we go look at a couple other Gephis, a couple other images, you're going to see them spread out in a different way, whereas this one is kind of a centralized cluster with very little not integrated. One thing I do like is there's a small little dino synergy you see off to the side in your Hibernating Razortooth, Stout Drake, and Chant of Umbrak, which isn't something you're always going to play into, but has the potential there as well, because I think Chant of Umbrak is a really good card underdrop later. But then you have Thundersoar over there, which shows you how this tool can take a piece of that dino synergy and then tie it into the rest of your deck in ways you might not think. At least ways I wouldn't normally think right off the bat. And that's Thunderstomper has the ability to damage one of your own creatures and buff its own attack. So in relation to Scourge Hydra and Stout Shambler, there's payoffs if you were to destroy one of your own creatures with that. So that's very cool to me that it shows it tying in there. What are your overall thoughts on this deck pairing and how Gephi's representing it?
Maybe I should tell something about how I changed. I mean, I prepared this specific display of this graph. The different colors that
Mm-hmm.
you can see, as you said, are the different clusters. Uh, like this small cluster of dinosaurs in the Chan of Umbro and stuff. Um, these clusters are the cards in there are the most connected to each other. Um, and the size of each node, that's actually called it's connected to the in-betweenness of a node or a card. And that means that the more in and outgoing edges you have, like these arrows going in and out from and to it, the more you have of those, the better is, or the higher is the in-betweenness, because it is in between other nodes. It connects them,
Mm-hmm.
you could say. And this was my personal thinking, that, and I don't consider myself an expert in Solforge and a good Solforge player, but I'm just trying to I came up with ideas on why a card could be interesting. And I thought a card that is a provider and is also a seeker in this case, like it provides something for another card, but it can also be can also combo off something else. Is more flexible than just something that only sits there and is okay. This is a dinosaur. It doesn't do anything else. But for example, like Conflagrate maybe, which is both a spell itself, so it works for other cards that need one spells, but it also works off mages. So it's kind of an in between. You can use it in two ways, you could say. Right? It's not just something that is only a giver or a receiver, you could say. So that's why this Conflagrate, for example, is very big in size. You can see, if you look at maybe White Maiden, it's smaller and you can see lots of arrows coming in. So White Maiden needs spells to work, and all the spells are pointing in on it.
Yep.
That's why it's a bit smaller than others.
And one thing I think that is interesting when you talk about this in between is the size of the nodes. It's not a perfect 1-to-1, but if this is your first attempt at playing the deck, being able to see this in your mind, you could equate size of the node may generally mean I would like to upgrade that card more often because it has potential higher payouts, or higher likelihood of giving its payout the next time you draw it, right?
Yeah, because you can use it in multiple ways, and it won't be useless most of the time, so it's worth to level it up. Yeah.
Right. One other thing I think that's worth noting, and one of the reasons I selected this graph to be our first Gephi we look at, is that I truly believe all of these tools exist to help the human analyze their decks. And there's a couple of things I'd like to point out with this deck that I think really drive home that point. And one of those is the Bone Scythe Reaver just hanging out in the corner over there by himself. If your mind is only looking for synergies, you might look at the Bone Scythe Reaver and say, well, that doesn't synergize with anything, and so maybe it's not useful. But then you read the card or you understand the card and you know, oh, that's a very useful card. Bone Scythe Reaver at level 1 destroys a minion. At level 2 destroys a level 1 creature, and at level 3 destroys a level 2 creature. So it seems like it's always behind the curve until you start playing it and then realize Bone Scythe Reaver is one of the better underdrops in the game, i.e. in cycle 3 or 4. If you've never played it, you can just remove an Oakfather from the board, or a Darkforge Drained Zombie Brute, which I have the pleasure of going against quite often. So things of that nature, you really have to understand the cards. And then there's one other thing that's going on with this deck that I really wanted to point out that I really think is cool, and that's, so you have a Stout Shambler, which is a great modifier for a Shambler because it makes it stay on the board a little bit longer, having higher health counts. But then it also has the Hibernating Razortooth and the Stout Drake. So those are 3 creatures with potential, high potential for stats. Not the Hibernating Razortooth right off the bat, per se, but paired into a Mage synergistic deck, which are creatures who inherently have lower stats. So when you look at it, that's kind of a way to see, oh, there's something that's offsetting an inherent weakness in the Mage playstyle, which is also useful in a deck. But just looking at the synergies, you're not going to necessarily see that piece of it.
Yeah, that's something that I should add, that the synergies are all from the collection manager, and of course I added some synergies for myself that I found interesting, which weren't in there before. I also edited some of those that weren't correctly discovered. But there's a lot of synergies, or a lot of abilities, you could say, like buffing of creatures, or destroying creatures, or replacing them from, like, opponent. Let's say Botanime, for example. They are not taken into consideration because they are not a real synergy. They are just pure payoff, you could say. And this is something that the tool lacks for now. That these payoffs are not really taken into account. So that's something that you need to keep in mind if looking at this and say, okay, this is a nice synergy, but these cards have payoff when you can provide the synergy. Yeah, then you have some payoff. But other cards, they have just pure payoff without having needing some synergy. And yeah, you shouldn't forget.
Right. So let's move on to our second deck pairing here. So we're going to look at these 2 decks, the Belonging Chemists and the Force of Savant and Infusing. So this is an Auratech, so it's Tempest and Aloyan fusing, which I would say you don't see a lot of currently in playstyle. So I thought it was very awesome that um, your tool grabbed one, showed us some with some good synergy, and we're going to take a look at it here. This one is, I would say, slightly centralized like the last one, with a couple of, maybe a little stronger outliers per se, but not drastic. It's still a decently centralized deck, just looking at the graph. I really like the mini warrior synergy off to the side, which is actually quite a bit more robust than the mini dino synergy we saw, I believe. And so you've got 4 warriors, but one of those happens to be the hibernating spell knight. So instead of the thunder stomper with potential destruction synergy, this is a warrior with mage synergy and spell slinging synergy in a potential spell slinging deck. So that's a very cool tie-in, I thought there. And then you kind of look over, and I think you see a very similar like mage spell synergistic cluster as what we saw before, just with different cards. The Sentinel is kind of central there. The more spells you play, the stronger it's going to get. Burnout really is just going to be great. It's going to buff all your creatures. Burnout Listening Rain's a really nice strong combo. But one thing I did also really want to point out here is the Forgeborn abilities tied in for synergies here. We saw some of them on the last image, but I don't think they were as shown to be as pivotal as they would be in this deck. So you have Repurpose is really tying into your deploys and things like that. So Recycling Inventor, you could gain the recycling ability, you could use the Inventor proc to get a new gizmo. The Raging Mystic, it comes back in, it can buff another person, which is very useful. And it's also an aggressive creature, so you could replace it and then put it in an unblocked lane. Stormcaller, all these deploys, it's just kind of triggering, which is really useful. And then Enhance. So Enhance, I really liked that it's tying with Aegis Wings. If you get past the first level of Aegis Wings, that's a pretty good jump in power level in my mind. One of the better you can get in the game, going, from one card level to the next, outside of, Krogius and some of the, Scorchbane Dragons, things like that.
Yeah, I actually had to. This is one of the synergies I just not found, but I put in myself, because I thought, okay, we have this nice reanimate ability, for example, and that means we can put things in again, and this helps when the things that we put in already have some ability they could use, like a deploy or like an activation ability they can do. That's why I put this in additionally. So I extended this sheet, the sheet from the collection manager a little bit, and made appropriate ticks for all the cards that have deploy abilities. And so now they kind of connect. And you mentioned enhance and upgrading cards. It's not a real synergy if a card is better when it's upgraded, but some things, and that's I put it also into the list. They work better when they are upgraded, like hibernating, for example. I said, okay, hibernating and upgrade kind of upgrades. It's kind of a synergy because it gets you faster to what you really want from this card in higher levels. The same goes for free cards, by the way. There are a lot of cards that provide something for free, but they have a you need to provide something first. Like you need to heal, you need to get some healing, and when you've healed something or when you got life points, then you can play something for free. And these are also you need to have some precondition fulfilled to do them, and that's why I put this in as a synergy. Said, okay, this is a free card, but you have to have healing, for example, or you have to replace a creature or something to play something for free. Because in the beginning there were lots of free cards, and okay, free is just great. I didn't really know how to handle how to do free, because free doesn't interact with anything else. It's just a free card to play. It's not a synergy in itself. It's just very, very good.
Right.
But with these additional preconditions, although there are some cards that still are purely free, and because they are, you can play them for free if they are upgraded. And I think for this reason, I said, okay, if they are only free when they are upgraded, then they need upgrading abilities to have the synergy of free. So there's a free upgrade synergy, it's called. Yeah.
Right. Nice. So yeah, like I can see that in your, if you look really closely on the lines, there's tags as to exactly why that synergizes.
Yeah.
Yep. And you'll see that free upgrade synergy
It doesn't
there.
tell you from this graph you would really have to look into this synergies table to see which which type of things connect with each other. Of course, it's also freely customizable if you have to call if you have these the files, and then you can customize this.
So we're going to jump over to our last deck views that we're going to look at here, and this is the Scavengers of Nightmare and the Watchdogs of Predator and Depth. This is a Disian combination, so Necra Mutera. And this one is, it seems like there's a lot less going on. Like in your mind, it's a lot less active. But, you know, in a way, it's got some, I would say, cleaner play lines. It's telling you that maybe some cards are a little bit, you know, more impactful than others. But one thing I noticed right off the bat is on the left-hand side, you're going to see Nap Time, Sated Raptor, Pyrrhix Embrace, Life Drain, Ferocious Ravager, you know, and then that kind of ties into the middle with Disian Siphon, Soul Siphon, Gloomripper Hag, like, so you're going to get, there's a pretty strong life gain synergy going on in this deck, and I think that's a pretty typical thing you're going to see in Disian. But this, you know, the more cards that are in that community or cluster, like, you know, that shows you its strength. One thing I've really liked is this Krogius tie-in. You know, so when I would look at the deck, there's a lot of times I would see, oh, the Army Commander, that, okay, there's a potential Krogius deck. And so this tool shows me that, but it also ties my Krogius back into the life gain because of that level 2 Krogius, which a lot of people will skip. But I will tell you, if you play Krogius enough, there's plenty of games where you don't want to skip that second level and you end up playing it. So that's very interesting to see. At the very top, you have a very small Asperian Steelplate Grove Mother Replace synergy, which is very interesting. And then, you know, so that's something that if you look at the deck in Gephi, you might say, well, maybe that I don't want to lean into replace synergies with this deck pairing. And that's an accurate statement, but both of those cards are never cards that you're fully leaning into replace synergies, right? Asperian Steelplate comes up. If you have a Grove Mother out there, of course you replace it. But if you have a weak creature out there that's already been damaged, it's just a great card. And then one thing I love, just standing out in a silo of its own, is the Stampeding Bear. So if, like, this is a card that, you know, almost should maybe get tied in with Army Commander 2 as well. But the fact that Krogius is in here, Krogius is always going to be your option number 1. But this is a really cool deck in that, you know, and shout out to Core. You know, my brother Greg plays a deck with a Camouflage Bear and a Krogius and Enhanced level 3. So he's got a way to, whichever one he missed, upgrade both of his just absolutely monstrous threats in the 3rd and 4th cycle. And so this deck is showing that exact same thing to me. Like, if you've naturally upgraded Krogius, cool. Army Commander's getting used on that bear, and that bear's going to roll over, you know, your opponent's front line. I think this deck has a lot of strong potential. And then, you know, its purples is nothing to, you know, to shake a stick at either. We've pretty much talked almost all Uterran. But the Negrium, you got a nice little scientist synergy, you know, small thing. You got 2 stealth creatures, Portal Shade, Zithian Dreadmaw, pretty strong. And then, you know, that Necromancer. Not every game you're going to play it, but if you can, that with paired into an Army Commander deck with the threats we talked about, this looks like a really cool, strong pairing.
Yeah. I should add that the Stampeding Bear, I think it's Bear, right? Bear is probably the card that has high payout when it's in level 3.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So this would be another thing to add to the list, because as I went through the list, and I didn't go through every card with these upgrades because there's just quite a lot of it. But the list, of course, needs constant upgrading and upgrading itself. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So I would have to add tick to Bear that it's very good when it's upgraded. Yeah. And this goes for maybe also some other stuff. It's an evolving process. Yeah.
Well, and you can't get every synergy, right? Like, you're gonna hit the ones that you can, and as you said, you're constantly upgrading it, which is what makes this, you know, extremely useful as well. Is that it's a work in progress. It's never a complete project per se. But I just say these things to emphasize, you know, the human aspect. You know, for the players out there, you can't ever take the recommendation at face value without putting a little bit of you know, horsepower behind the thoughts. And obviously, Stefan, you've put a ton of horsepower and thought behind this thing, which, you know, thank you so much for, you know, sharing this with us, for bringing this tool forward to, you know, the community, at least, you know, in this aspect so far. I mean, it's just really, really cool to see the amount of effort that some people put into this game, and into helping others, which you've told me right now creating these images and creating these lists is a fairly manual process, and I've seen you do it to help just people asking questions on the Discord. So very active, phenomenal member of the community. So I really appreciate you just stepping out there. The one last question I kind of want to throw your way to wrap up all of this, because you've mentioned little pieces of it throughout, but what are your milestones or what are your objectives moving forward with this tool?
Yeah. The main thing you already mentioned, you already said that it's now you have to do a little bit of manual stuff to get these outputs. It's for now still a text-based, you could say, text-based tool that gives you some text output, and you can then take this and put it into this nice free tool Gephi and maybe play around with it, get these images. But the main idea, of course, would be to get a maybe graphical interface done, and I've teamed up a little bit with Namrock because he already made some stuff in graphical Python interfaces. So maybe we can get there someday to have a graphical interface, and then maybe I can provide the code somewhere and people can download it and use it. I don't see this getting into any web-based thing right now, because it needs a lot more experience in web pages and how that works. I mean, I dabbled a little bit in it, but it's already came up with some problems. So maybe someone can help me out, get this on the web. It would be interesting. But maybe once the stable version is up, I can put it online for download, at least, maybe. Also, and of course, it would also be nice to have some input on other synergies, right? Do we need more synergies, or like do we need to extend the list on additional cards? That would be nice. Another thing that came to mind was, and which I already implemented now, is I wanted to look at specific decks that contain specific cards only. Because now later on, when you look at the table, you won't see these cards anymore. You would just see the synergies and the decks themselves. But an interesting thing was to look at just what decks contain, let's say, Mantis and contain Inspire. Because lately I've also added this, I coded Inspire so that it actually takes the Forgeborn ability from the fused Forgeborn, and because that's what it's doing, and also shows this as an entry in the graph. So now you can actually, with the filter, search for only these decks, the fusions that contain these two cards. That's something nice. And generally, I was thinking of, since I have a collection of decks already in the tool, there could be a way of managing or organizing them. Maybe if we have a graphic interface someday, then we can have some sort, search functionality like this. Yeah, that's something.
I do love that you mentioned Inspire and you tied that into the tool as well. In the lab or in the background here, we've been kind of working on a deck that Inspire is one of its pivotal Forgeborn capabilities, and so that might get played in an online or a tournament here soon and be shown. But it's I think it's a very different concept deck that's tying in two concept decks, and so I think Inspire has a long ways to go with the community, and I think we're going to start hopefully delving that out pretty soon here. But you did mention kind of some of the things that you're looking for with this tool. Part of that I heard was a shout out if there's a web developer out there that wants to kind of jump into this project and help out. That's something that could help move this forward. How could players or anyone that wants to help out, or people with questions want to talk about the synergies, how can people reach out to you, Stefan?
You can reach out to me on Discord. The easiest way. My nickname is TMind, TMind. Usually I'm always online on Discord, so that's the way to do it.
Awesome. And I'll have your Discord handle in the description of the channel or of this video, just in case anyone wants to reach out to you. I said it at the very beginning, I think, but I just want to reiterate, thank you for what you're doing for the community. And extremely, important. But thank you for the time to come on here and talk about it, and all the time that you've put in over the last 2 weeks, so that we could kind of collaborate, create, and share this with some of the viewers.
Yeah, it was very cool. Thank you for having me, giving me this opportunity. I'm happy if anyone is interested in it and wants to exchange ideas and help me making it better. That would be great. Thank you.
Right. And then lastly, I do want to put out for our viewers next week's episode. So Friday after this, I'm going to have a special announcement for an event. I hope everyone is in tune for that. And I'm very excited to share this with the community and kind of move it forward. It's going to be a really fun themed event that's going to need some community assistance and tie-in. So very excited, looking forward to it. And with that, thanks. Thanks for attending this lesson of the Forgeborn Finishing School. If you liked this video, please subscribe, comment, or consider donating to our Patreon account. I'm Casey Kidd, and I look forward to our next lesson.